Today we are going to learn how to market an entire country and continent. Welcome back to the Breaking and Entering Advertising podcast. The goal of the show is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. This one is the brand side segment here because we're interviewing Susan Coghill, who is the CMO of Tourism Australia. She's going to break down the Come and Say Good Day platform and why Ruby the Kangaroo and clear brand codes matter, and how Droga 5 built a new 5-market chapter with local talent, including Robert Irwin in the US. So we get into the New York launch stunt with an Aussie snag truck, smart timing around culture, and the simple rules she uses to make tourism work. If you lead a brand and need hits without giant budgets, this one helps. If you want to break into creative advertising or creative marketing, this episode is for you. Now on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising podcast. And as usual, I'm your accomplice, Geno Schellenberger. Kick it, Ellie. And just a note that this episode is sponsored by Tourism Australia. Susan and her team invited us to visit their Good Day Dogs activation in New York City. It's a part of their Come and Say Good Day campaign US rollout. We had a lot of fun. We posted an ads in the wild about it. We'll put all the assets in the description. Go check it out. Now on with the show. Susan Coghill, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising podcast. How are you doing today?
Hello, Geno. I'm really well. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Very excited for this conversation.
It is a pleasure. And we were talking before, I think this is one of the brands I get envious of. If I wanted to leave Breaking and Entering, working at Tourism Australia would be on the top of the list. And you are the CMO for Tourism Australia, which I think is so freaking cool.
That's right. It's a pretty good gig here, I have to say. I'm selling the country I love to travelers all around the world. Get a lean into creativity as a key distinctive way to tell our story. I'm super lucky.
Absolutely. And you're telling the story and you're selling it so well. Years of great tourism brand campaigns coming from Tourism Australia. So we want to get into that, and we'll definitely get into the latest iteration of Come and Say Good Day campaign. But before we do, what is the one restaurant that you would recommend for somebody that's visiting Australia? Right at the top, where should we have to go?
That is so hard. I have to tell you, we have the most amazing food and wine scene here. I actually had lunch with a friend from America. In fact, she was an old boss of mine from my days at Team One back in LA. And she was back visiting, and we went and had lunch at Iceberg's Dining Room on Bondi Beach. And the food is incredible. The view over the ocean, looking back at Bondi Beach, is absolutely incredible. But also, I would say go to Margaret for the incredible seafood here in Sydney. Also, if you go down south to, say, South Australia or Tasmania, getting fresh oysters from the water, from the ocean, eating them directly out of the water is absolutely incredible. So we have a pretty amazing array of food and wine choices here.
It sounds amazing. So we'll have to come check it out.
When you come visit, we'll go to Icebergs for sure.
Absolutely. Let's get that on the books. But today, I want to talk about the campaign and some of the activations you all have launched for this campaign. But getting into this, the campaign Come and Say Good Day, how long has this been going on? Because I know there's a new iteration with Robert Irwin that we're going to talk about, but when did it first launch?
So Come and Say Good Day launched in 2022. So that was just as COVID was winding down, sort of. That was the year that we reopened to the world. We had been closed as a destination for nearly 2 years. So we wanted a campaign that would welcome travelers from all of our 16 markets around the world, that would cross borders, cross languages, cross cultures, and it was meant to be just one big welcoming message to the world. And it was interesting because when we started developing the campaign, we also didn't know which markets would be opening when. We started... we had, for a while, we had a bubble, a travel bubble with New Zealand, and then we had one with Singapore, and we slowly started opening to the world in, I think, February or March 2022. But we just didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, if you think back to COVID, it was such an unpredictable time. So we needed a campaign that worked, yeah, again, across all of our markets. And so we came up with this welcoming message that was all about inviting the world to come and have an Australian holiday, inviting them to come and say good day. And it was also a campaign that picked up on the messaging from an old iconic campaign in the US with Paul Hogan from 1984, his Come and Say Good Day campaign, if you remember that, the old shrimp on the Barbie line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But in
Yeah.
this one, you call them prawns, I believe it was
Well,
mentioned
yeah,
in the
after
latest.
40 years, we corrected the story. That's right. We let the world know that they're actually prawns down here. We don't call them shrimp.
Okay, got it. Some history, some legacy here, but really getting into the pandemic, getting out of the pandemic quarantine time, you need an all-encompassing campaign that can go across major markets all across the globe, a
Yeah.
unifying message that invites people to
Yeah.
Australia, and come and say good day is what was landed upon here.
That's right. And the other key part of it was using our icons as well. We really wanted to remind the world what they knew and loved about Australia and trigger those memories that have been sort of dormant maybe in consumers' minds over that COVID period. And by tapping into that, hopefully earn greater attention.
What are some of those icons when people think Australia from the testing that you all had here? What were those things that you knew you must
Yeah, well, I'm jokingly pointing at the Sydney Opera House right here. That is one of our top icons for sure. But no surprise, it was also a kangaroo. We did our brand codes research through lockdown. In fact, actually, one of the things we did through lockdown was a deep dive into understanding the rules of growth in our category. So we sort of set out 10 principles of great destination marketing. And we sort of looked at other categories to learn how, I mean, if you think of say, packaged goods, there's 125 years or so of brand management knowledge and history there. Doesn't really exist in tourism as much as I looked for it everywhere. There just sort of hadn't been sort of a code, I guess, or rules of growth that we could lean into. So we looked at our brand codes. We looked at our drivers of destination choice. We looked at our largest and closest competitors. We looked at what it meant to be driving greater attention. We looked at creative effectiveness. We looked at a whole range of things to help us be better in our marketing. But that brand codes research in particular was really important because we wanted to know what are those associations that consumers around the world have with Australia, positive associations, and how could we use them to cut through in a highly competitive and cluttered category. And coming out of COVID as well, more destinations were investing in destination marketing. More governments were investing in destination marketing because I think by turning off the taps through COVID, they all of a sudden realized the economic benefit of all those tourists coming to their country. So we had a lot more destinations spending a lot more money. They were dumping money into a lot of our key markets. They were telling stories more creatively than they ever were before. And travel and tourism can be a category that's a sea of sameness. So we wanted to make sure that if somebody saw our ad with our beautiful and amazing beaches, they wouldn't confuse it with another destination with beaches or food and wine. And leveraging, first and foremost, a kangaroo, creating a character that the world knows and loves. Everybody loves kangaroos. I have to say, one of the things I love most in my job is when I see somebody see a kangaroo for the first time because they absolutely lose it. Everybody falls apart when they see a kangaroo. They are amazing.
I would freak out. I would freak out. You're doing so getting into that moment, then you're getting all this research here. You don't have much of a competitive, you don't really have this archive and brand history.
For the
You can't really do
category.
a complete, yeah, for the category, the audit in the category, there's not that much strength and research there. So you look within, you do your own homework here. You send this to is the ad agency doing this? You're doing this? Do you
We're
give
do-
them a brief? When do you get the idea? When do you approve as a CMO? Come and say good day is the
yeah.
campaign to run.
So we did this body of work internally with our research and insights team and our research agency. So we built that out ourselves, and that fed into the brief to the agency. We were also, so our agency at the time was M&C Saatchi, and we definitely knew that we wanted. Again, that brief, it needs to cross borders, work across cultures, etc. We knew we needed a degree of flexibility in the production because we just didn't know whether our international borders or even some of our state borders, which had opened and closed through COVID, we weren't sure what we would be facing into. But we also knew that we wanted a welcome, a very clear welcome. We wanted to harken back to that historical vibe from the Paul Hogan campaign. And from that, the agency took it and ran with it. We probably did, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of creative before we got to Come and Say G'day. Or, well, not to the line, but to the concept behind it of this character Ruby going on this journey across Australia. And yeah, it probably took us a good, I don't know, 6 months, maybe 9 months to get to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
understood. And you've stayed consistent with that campaign, just with different iterations, different approaches, activations, if you will, from
Yeah.
that campaign.
Yeah, look, I think while we have this amazing history of great creative campaigns, I think one of the things that didn't work in our favor is we had a tendency to chop and change a little bit. And so we weren't getting the multiplier effect of consistency over time. And as a brand that doesn't have huge media budgets, particularly in expensive media markets like the US, China, Japan, etc., UK, expecting consumers to relearn your brand or recognize you in a new format just wasn't working in our favor. So again, part of the brief to the agency was something that would be enduring, that would stand the test of time, that we could build on, we could iterate on, but hopefully consumers would recognize from campaign to campaign or activation to activation. And we've seen that happen. So I talk about our brand code research that we did. We go in and we do another study every year or two. And our character, Ruby, our kangaroo character, is now sort of in that upper quadrant of brand codes. So it's pretty good, I think, to be able to have a character like that. I mean, I know in some ways it's going back to old school marketing and creating a character or a brand mascot, but it works, and it works for a reason.
Yeah, you build the association, and it's tempting. It's something that's tempting for advertising professionals to want to switch up, rebrand, create a new campaign from scratch. If it was up to an agency, they would do that every 3 months. But like you
Probably.
said, it doesn't help build any sort of like lasting association. You have to have that. You have to fall in love with the enduring brand campaigns, but also
100%.
how do you allow for room to iterate?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I kind of want to get into now. This latest iteration that you guys launched about a month ago with Robert Irwin and the latest facet of this campaign. Tell me about this next approach. What is going on with this new campaign?
Yeah, and well, interestingly, this next chapter of the campaign was done by Droga 5. So we switched agencies midway through here. And when we did that agency pitch, I was very clear that we want to keep Come and Say Good Day. We want to keep the characters. We did a public briefing to all the agencies who were interested. And one of my key points was you got to understand, we want creativity. We talk a lot about being fresh and familiar, taking something people know, but put a fresh spin on it. And that is very important to us. But equally as important, or almost more important, is that consistency. So, if an agency is not comfortable with iterating on an existing idea, then you might want to self-select and not participate.
No, I
But
love that. You
full
have to be
credit,
very clear and transparent right at the beginning. And if
yeah.
anything, we love parameters. So the fact that you put the parameters there, that helps creative professionals.
Yeah, some beautiful constraints, right, to give them that freedom within a framework. And credit to the Droga 5 team, who was then at the pitch time, it was a combination of the Monkeys, which is the local creative shop here, and Droga 5 US, London, and the rest of their international offices. They leaned right into it. They said, we see the value of these assets that you've created. We can tell a new, fresh story with it. They came armed with case studies of where they've taken other existing brands and iterated on an existing platform as well, which gave me confidence that they really meant it. If you look at the campaign, or if you look at the short film that we did, that 9-minute film from 2022 to this campaign that we've done, or this iteration of the campaign that we've done, it is very different, not just in production style, because again, in 2022 it was a bit of a funny era, but the adventure aspect of this campaign, and the brief this time. So in 2022, again, the brief was one global campaign that welcomed the world. The brief this time was we wanted to go local across 5 key brand markets. So we wanted to take one idea, one set of storytelling, but we did a version for the US where we follow Robert Irwin and another American traveler. In China, we follow Yosh Yu, who is a really fabulous actor, singer, great up-and-coming talent in China. We follow him in a friendship group traveling around Australia. In the UK, we have Nigella Lawson make an appearance because, again, she loves to travel around Australia and experience our great food and wine, and she's such a wonderful advocate. In Japan, we had a comedian and variety show presenter, Abba Rukan, who just brings this amazing, crazy, wonderful Japanese energy to his experiences visiting. He is a World Heritage travel expert, and so he's now been to 5 of our World Heritage sites around Australia, so we kind of keep building his character out within the campaign as well. And in India, we got Sara Tendulkar, who is, if you're a cricket fan, you will know Sachin Tendulkar, you'll know that name, an iconic, incredible Indian cricket legend. Well, his daughter is, she's an entrepreneur and a philanthropist and a wellness influencer in her own right. So she came down and traveled around Australia, and she was able to lean into, the wonderful memories of traveling to Australia with her father and family. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So you're
That was
doing
a
this the right
success.
way. You're doing this in a really smart way. Like the strategy is very clear. You honed in on the key markets. You found the right person for those markets there. We can talk for hours on how do you select each person from each market and what was the strategy and getting that. Did you have agencies on the ground at each of those spots, or was the Monkeys and the Droga 5, did they have locations there? How did you
Yeah.
culturally tap into each of those
Which
markets is
people?
my main question.
It's such a good question. It's a really important question for this campaign, and it's a really relevant question to how we work at Tourism Australia as well. Before we started recording, I mentioned to you that much of my team is ex-agency people, so they are all very creatively led and very passionate and hands-on and involved as well. We have a program that we call Friends of Australia, which is a group of influential people, Australians and locals across the world, who help us tell our story. So if we can, we lean into people within our Friends of Australia program, but also we do a review of, understanding what talent is hot right now, what is their connection to Australia. We want everybody that we work with to have a genuine connection to Australia and be able to tell that story of their travels, their experiences here, from the heart. Because in actual fact, our whole brand strategy is around genuine connections. So I think if we veered off path and had somebody who hadn't been here and experienced it, it wouldn't come across as authentic. And then there's a lot of debate and discussion that goes into it because, our local teams and our local agencies will have a point of view on maybe who's hot right now. It's a little bit of a production matrix, like, oh, who might be in the country at that time? Who's available? We've got a shoot window. How does all that work? And from an agency standpoint, the way we work is that the Droga 5 team in Sydney is our lead agency. They will develop the overarching idea, then they will tap into the local Droga 5 teams on the ground across all of our markets. I think it's just China. China, I think, is an Accenture office still at the moment, but the rest of them are Droga 5 offices. So we kind of work as one big virtual global team.
That's nice. I'm sure that went into like selecting the agency too, having that in mind, like having presence and having the understanding of those different markets was probably pretty important too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, it is a funny place that we sit because on one hand, we represent a nation, a country of Australia, and so we have to be very true to that. But equally, if we're not locally relevant, if we're not finding that connection point in each of our markets where the local audience can maybe see themselves being welcomed, place themselves in that holiday in Australia, we won't be as effective. So we always talk about the overlap or the Venn diagram and the sweet spots right there in the middle of being true to brand Australia, but really local, relevant, and welcoming.
Understood. Understood. Absolutely. So tell me about the execution then, specifically for the US market here that I'm familiar with. What went into it? How did it go? What's going on right now? Give us the rundown on the
Yeah.
execution and the launch.
Well, so the overarching campaign, of course, is about inviting the world to come down and have a holiday of a lifetime, a holiday that they want to share with people. The narrative construct is basically you see various travelers coming and having adventures, but they all open with them telling the story, relating it back to their family or friends. So the U.S. ad, of course, opens with somebody who bursts into a bar in America going, "You won't believe what happened in Australia," and you're transported back, and boom, he's down in South Australia in the Eyre Peninsula, where he loses his phone and Robert Irwin picks him up and he's off on his adventure around Australia. And we see a range of incredible locations. We see Ruby along the way acting as an enabler on this trip. But in the US execution, we really leaned into Robert Irwin because he's so well known and so loved in America. And again, I talked about fresh and familiar. I mean, that applies to our talent strategy. It's familiar because America loves Steve Irwin, crocodile hunter. When I first moved to Australia 20 years ago, my young nephews at the time, the first thing they asked me was whether I'd met Steve Irwin yet. And in fact, I had a text the other day from a friend in America who told me he'd seen our new campaign starring Steve Irwin. I love that. I mean, I know that he meant Robert Irwin, but it just goes to show you how strong those memories are still of
Yeah.
Steve Irwin. But so yeah, we really leaned into Robert. We didn't know when we signed up with him to do the campaign. We didn't know about the Bonds campaign. I'm sure you're familiar with that, the Bonds
Yes.
underwear campaign, where Robert sort of burst onto the scene and as a fully grown man, as many people didn't realize, there he is shirtless, making the internet meltdown. That launched 2 days before we filmed with him. So he was already on, he had a strong base in America, but he had a real rise in popularity and attention then when that happened. That would have been April, I think, when we were filming with him.
Interesting.
So yeah,
I feel like the timing as well with like Dancing with the Stars,
do you
like
know,
it seems like you kind of hit the jackpot
we
in terms
did.
of attention there.
Again, look, credit to Robert and to Darren, his manager as well. That was all down to them. They have just they're managing his career so beautifully. And again, we didn't know about any of that, but what we do is, again, because we don't have huge budgets, we always have to make sure that we're taking advantage of what is happening more broadly in culture. We always aim to find some sort of cultural connection if we can in a country. And that Dancing with the Stars moment was fabulous for us. So that meant that we could debut our campaign on, is it ABC, I think is the network in America. So we ran our ad in that opening episode of Dancing with the Stars just to pick up on that. We've created a lot of content sort of surrounding it as well. And I think just as Americans' attention on Robert, their affection for him, the fact that he's this amazing dancer, who knew, and he's also just such a proud Australian, and he tells wonderful stories about our country, about our wildlife. I mean, it is incredibly rare where we have amazing celebrity talent who also is a part of our industry, because Australia Zoo is this wonderful tourism experience that we have up in Queensland. And he's just this perfect mix of all these things to tell the Australian story. So yeah, we got lucky. It was a perfect storm.
Absolutely.
In a good way.
Absolutely. And also, you talk to me about, so you had the film launch. What were some of the other kind of tentpole moments, or what were the other tactics within this iteration of the campaign that you all planned and launched for U.S. market?
Yeah, in addition to the film, which of course runs on TV, online video, social, etc., very strong social game. You know, the team here found some archival footage of Robert and his family. So Steve Irwin, Terry holding baby Robert, and he talks about that, that wonderful legacy. We have video clips of him talking about wanting to find his American tourist, which again, I think sent the internet into meltdown. And there were a lot of American women putting their hands up, commenting on his post, going, me.
Of course.
Also, we wanted to create a bit of a fame moment around launch as well. But of course, the tricky thing is Robert's filming Dancing with the Stars, so we couldn't do something specifically with him. So the team came up with a whole nother fresh activation idea. And I said a moment ago around finding cultural points of connection in each market. They came up, so Droga5 in New York and our US team and our PR team here in Sydney worked together, identified that hot dogs are having a moment. Bougie gourmet hot dogs in America are so hot right now. And obviously they're iconically American in New York. But in Australia, we have our own culture of a sausage and bread or a snag, something that happens, they're often at Saturday morning fundraisers at Bunnings, which is a hardware store, sort of like your Home Depot. But it's this
okay, I'm getting it.
So sausage sizzle, you buy one for a couple bucks and you help raise money for your local school. So you have this thing that are very culturally similar, bring them together, layer on top of it that gourmet bougie hot dog thing, and we turned it into a hot dog food truck driving around New York for a weekend. But it was all wrapped in Australian stories. So each of the sausage and breads had a bit of a story. They came from, one for each of our major city. We had Australian chefs there bringing it to life. We brought really amazing food content creators down. We brought the doggist, so kind of, layering in a little bit of wordplay and bringing him down. But it was all about basically getting attention, stopping people in the tracks, telling the story in a slightly different way. And again, just finding that cultural connection. So again, fresh and familiar, something I know. Hot dogs, something fresh. It's a sausage and bread or an Aussie snag, and just getting people to talk about it. But we also used it as an opportunity to create content with people sharing their memories of coming to Australia. So what was it that they loved best? What were those wonderful experiences? And proving that Australia is a place that really does stay with you.
I love it.
In doing that, the other thing I'd add is as much as that seems like a really fun activation, and it was very creative, but it was also really strategic, because we know, again, that cluttered sea of sameness in our category. We've got to tell our stories in fresh and different ways. New York is such an important market for us. It's one of our 3 primary geographies in America, so California, New York, and Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And Qantas, so our national carrier, will be flying nonstop from New York to Australia shortly, sort of priming the New York audience to be thinking about Australia, because the lead time to consider and purchase or book a long haul holiday can be a little bit longer. So we're laying the groundwork.
Yes, yeah, that consumer journey might take some time from awareness to actually booking the trip. But you got me thinking about it. That's for sure here.
I hope so. Look at this. See, you too could be here.
I mean, this is added to the campaign tactics here. This is beautiful here. So what's next is my question around campaigns, getting people to book trips to Australia. Do you want people to stay in Australia, or is this just a tour? This is just to visit? Like, because I saw some campaigns. I mean, actually, we briefed a campaign for Ohio to get people to want to move out for Ohio for a spec
Yeah.
campaign. That's something completely different. But do you want people to stay there or just visit, or is it a little bit of both? But what's next in
Yeah,
general?
this is tourism. This is definitely tourism. This is not an immigration campaign. We want
Gotcha.
people to come have a holiday of a lifetime.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we want more people to come to Australia. We want them to disperse and travel around the country and experience more of what we have to offer. We want them to have active holidays as well. You know, we're not a flop and drop passive holiday. We're somewhere where you go, you lean in, you experience, you meet the locals. You know, you can have transformational experiences in these incredible parts of the country. So we want people to come down and really make the most of it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And then any plus ups to this campaign? Like you said, the Qantas will be doing nonstop flights. So you're going to do some activations for that as well. Or so you're going to help
Yeah,
amplify that messaging.
Yeah, aviation access to Australia is so important. It is fundamental to our success being an island continent that we are. So we're incredibly lucky. We've never had more aviation access to Australia. More airlines flying here than ever before. United and American. And actually, you know, they have an incredible sale on right now. I probably shouldn't be plugging this, but my sister just booked a flight down in April for, I think, 800, 899, something like that, which is pretty incredible. So yeah, we're really lucky that it's becoming more, airfares are becoming more and more competitive as well. That was a
Gotcha.
challenge post-COVID as all of the airlines sort of spun up their services around the world, and they were making sure that they had the right aircraft on every single route. So it's definitely much more competitive now.
Thank you. Gotcha. Gotcha. So I'm curious. What advice would you have for somebody that's trying to get their job in advertising or marketing? You've obviously learned so much. You've completed a successful campaign. It's going to see a lot of people going to Australia as tourists here. So what have you learned from this or broader in your career that you can give to us some wisdom?
Okay, so some wisdom about the campaign, about building effective campaigns. Shall I do that
Yeah, let's
first
do
and then
that.
maybe talk about career advice?
Yeah.
From a campaign perspective, I would say the importance of consistency. Do not underestimate the multiplier effect of consistency. When you chop and change campaigns, again, you're asking consumers to recognize you. Consumers are too busy to do that work, so make it easy for them to recognize you. But again, keep it fresh and familiar. So find an idea, be consistent, but tell it in fresh and different ways so that it stays interesting. I think importantly, figuring out your brand codes. It goes back to that point of making it easy for people to recognize you, though. Give your consumers those shorthands that they can recognize time and again, and then use them. Keep using them. Mark Ritson talks about finding your brand codes and codify. Just, use those codes consistently. And then for us, again, as a brand that doesn't have huge budgets, I think leveraging those relevant cultural moments or connection points with a market or an audience is really important for us to be able to be more creative in our storytelling, drive more attention, and hopefully punch a little bit more above our weight. Those would be my
Yeah.
three key things.
I was going to say, being in Australia, Byron Sharp.
Hmm.
Isn't he in Australia? Wrote the book on how
Yeah,
brands grow,
how brands
and
grow.
I
That's
think
right.
Mark Ritson also has shared some beliefs in that school of marketing and the brand codes and what do they call it? Like the gateways, like distinctive assets,
Category entry points.
category entry points.
Yeah.
Yes, I think everybody. Is
Yeah,
that where
so
I'm getting at
interesting.
with this? Some of this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Are you asking how much that influenced this?
Yeah, I just like
100%.
I feel like this Australia. I have that association with
Yeah.
Byron Sharp and
Yeah.
how brands grow, and you're also speaking of some of that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think as in the marketing space, Australia has these known characters. They're probably distinctive brand assets for the marketing industry in our country, aren't they? But we're so
Yeah.
lucky again for this country, sort of in a farther corner of the world with only 26, 27 million people. We really have more than our fair share of marketing experts that are setting the agenda, not just in Australia, but globally. And there's no
Globally.
doubt that the thinking of Byron Sharp, Mark Ritson, I'm a huge fan of, Jenny Romaniuk, also from Ehrenberg Bass, they have definitely helped shape the thinking behind what we've done. I mean, I spoke at the beginning around our principles of great destination marketing that we've done. And we had to look outside the organization. We had to look at other categories. We had to look at other brands and how they have figured out the laws of growth in their category and apply it to destination marketing. So
I find that
100%.
so fascinating. And then what about for those that want to get into marketing or advertising? Knowing what you know now, how would you get your first job or how would you be successful in this industry?
Honestly, the first thing I'd say is they've got to have the energy and passion that somebody like you has. So you have been relentless about wanting to break into advertising, and I've enjoyed watching your journey.
Thank
And
you.
I think bringing that sort of energy, I think, to both your job search and to your first job is so important. I think don't be picky about your first, job or two. Just get in and get some experience. You can parlay it into the next thing. I think the other thing would be show up. In this post-COVID world, when we all have an option to work from home, you know what? Be the person who turns up early, and be the person who, sits at the front and asks questions and participates. Be the person who asks for opportunities and to work on projects. Because the more exposure you have, the more you're going to learn every single day. And also, the more exposure you have to other parts of the business, to other executives, and they know who you are. So you always want to build advocates, not just within your own team, but across the business as well. And I think if you're trying to make the shift from being agency side to brand side, if you're one of those people who maybe didn't go the grad route as a brand, which is me, I started my career in advertising, and I still consider myself a creative agency girl in many, many ways, and I'm very proud of that background. But I think that it used to be a little bit harder. I think sometimes brands used to think, you're one or the other. You're an agency person or you're a brand person, and maybe agency people can't do brand side roles. I like to think that's changing, at least here in Australia it is. I look at my team and, they're probably 70-80% ex-agency people. That could be, again, my bias, because I think agency people are really smart. They work hard. They're entrepreneurial. They're problem solvers, and they're also just generally good fun to be around. So yeah, I think that it's more possible now, but you just need to lean into that dream and really put yourself out there.
Susan Coghill, you crushed it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Geno.
Where can people go to find out more about the campaign Australia? Where should we send people for next steps?
You can either send people to, if they're planning their holiday, they can go to Australia.com. So we have a wonderful website that can help people plan their trip, give them lots of inspiration. If they're looking for kind of always on inspiration, which to be honest, the travel planning is now an always on activity for everybody, follow our socials. So follow Australia on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, we're on Facebook, all the usual places. The guys do a great team of being sort of, a mix of being beautiful Australian content and a bit fun, a bit witty and interesting. So follow us there.
Perfect. Absolutely. Susan, thank you so much for coming on. I wish you the best of luck. I can't wait for all the people to visit, share their stories, and say good day.
Thanks, Geno. Can't wait to see you down here.
Heck yeah, we're going to talk about that after this right now. We're going to get that going. Thank you.
Thank you.